So I actually want to start this with a quick little detour. This is just a quick refresher more for me than anything else. I'm just going to load up an official course here. A lot of times people give official courses some slack and that kind of stuff, especially because some of the real ones are either not that great or not made very well. But I want a quick little style refresher for myself. So I'm going to go to Katagawa. This is one of Matt F's courses. In case you can't see where this is going, he's a pretty prominent designer in the community, and I think it would be a good idea to spend some time looking at what he does for his bunkers. I just want a quick little refresher on shapes. That's the real reason I'm doing this.
Hello there and welcome to PGA Tour 2K21. This should be fun. Thanks for bringing me along to Katagawa Country Club. Let's kick this one off.
So on the tee here, we're not going to play around.
We'll take it step by step from there. How's that sound?
Okay, well, let's fly around. Just a little bit. See, right off the bat, kind of typical Matt F shape for bunkers. Knowing what we know now, we can see the way these are kind of pointing up towards the green. This one's doing the same. This one's kind of hinting up this way. Just trying to get a sense of the general shape styles that he's using. Obviously, I'm not going to do this kind of bunker look as well as he does. I don't really do this very much. And also, this is very much his style. He does this a lot. But for a quick little detour, that is fun. Now it's time to dig in. So back to mouse we go for now. I am going to try to demonstrate a little bit of his style on controller as well. Matt F is a mouse designer. And I started, and many of the people do something similar in general on controller. So we're going to head back to here. And let's take one of our greens. Let's go back to this one. Now we get to delete some of this stuff and put in some nicer bunkers. Because I mean, this is fine, but it's not exactly gonna, whet your fancy when it comes to interesting appearance and stuff. So we go here, delete this bad boy. So the first thing is for bunker shapes. A lot of the more experienced designers, myself included, like to use the measure tool to sketch out bunker shapes. This is really handy. Trying to figure out still what would be best to get that kind of Matt F style look here. So we have two general options. One would be one that maybe kind of goes something this way. This part here would kind of go up and then push into the green a little bit. Okay, we could maybe even go like this. How's this going to present from ground level back here? Okay. Let's go like this maybe. And this back part, I think we kind of want to just take this here. Where was the golf hole going again? This way? Something like that. Or maybe even kind of You can have it kind of tail off this way. Around the fairway. No, that seems worse. I think it's better here to have the bunker shape kind of go from here. When in doubt. It's not a perfect mesh with this green site. It's a little bit too kind of straight on, but this is just kind of how the land had it. I'm not trying to go for pure perfection here. But you can generally see what the shape I drew is trying to do. So now for the actual sculpting. Matt F does something that's a little bit particular to him. Some other designers do a similar type of thing as well. He tends to pre-sculpt his bunkers a fair bit. Kind of here. And then because he's on mouse here, what I mentioned about the way the flatten brush works, he tends to use this brush for this. Kind of just goes back and forth over stuff a bit. And you can do something like this. Now the bunker is mostly sculpted. Smooth that out a little more. I personally just like to go this one a little bit. I'm more used to the fuzzy. And then there is sand down. Or that's basically pre-sculpted. Maybe actually we just kind of keep this to there. Something's a little off of the shape. It's okay. Let's get a bunker in. So now the next part of what he does in particular is he usually takes the circle brush, sometimes a spinning gingerbread man or other brush depending on the style you're going for. And with the shape we have here, he will take this and trace around the edge of it. So there are a couple things to keep in mind here that I'm going to try to explain. Something you just saw me do a little bit of right there, so I'm actually going to stop. Because of how the brush works in this game, you can see I actually went a little bit deeper into this corner and then a little bit farther out here to try to counteract what the game wants to do on its own. Yeah, it's a very interesting way to do bunkers, Maddie. I'm sure you do nothing like this. And Matt F in particular definitely does absolutely nothing like this for the bunkers. So I'm going to keep going. I think I want to make some modifications to this shape, just like here. We'll see. I actually think I like the original idea better. So couple other things to keep in mind with this method. The first one is that there can be a little bit of a sweet spot in terms of the size of the brush that you use. Too small, and you can tend to get a little bit more scraggly shapes, so let me just try to show some of that. Deeper into the corner. This part didn't pick up at all. And then too big, and it can start to be a little bit back the other way. It's kind of a middle ground, which gets you tends to get you a good range of result. Made a 50-footer on 7 at Ogopogo. Who? Aloha, bro, amigos. What's up, Narwhal? So I'm just taking this and kind of dragging. You can do the same exact thing on controller. It's just different what you do with the camera. I'll try to demonstrate some of that afterwards. And we have the outside of this bunker essentially done. And we can take this and come inside and make sure we get all this stuff filled in. And what I said earlier, we need enough sand in the bunker, as dumb as that sounds, so it will then sit to its full depth. So now this bunker is mostly or entirely down to its depth. If you really want the shape to be precise, you can come here in the corner. And something else that Matty does on his bunkers, he's playing Ogopogo because I listed that as a course that demonstrates how you can limit yourself by macro sculpting with flatten brush. Compared to your later courses in particular, because I know you were someone who would use only flatten brush and some other designers still macro sculpt with it and that kind of stuff. And why I generally don't recommend that, or at least caution you to keep certain things in mind for people who do. One other thing Maddie in particular likes to do is kind of go from the corner and then drag inward. Can help you get that look. And then for cleaning this stuff up, so the terrain does have a little bit of triangulation to it. There's kind of a little bit of a feel that you get over time for how much to bump stuff out if you're going for a really clean look. And this is mostly just from trial and error and just spending more time getting familiar with the tools. Is it perfect? No. But is it good enough? Yeah. And something up here should probably change, but it's a half decent bunker. I didn't add in any lip sculpting or anything like that. And then this is one thing that I think raised brush can be particularly good for with bunkers. Kind of adding in some sculpting and stuff. You can kind of prop this part up a little more. If you want that to kind of push into the green a bit. Something with this part's off. I think it's just... so shape-wise. Yeah, the back end is superior. The front's still good. But anyway, you can also see here a couple things. So shape-wise, this part down here, if this part comes in, it's also kind of about getting the bunkers themselves aligned with the land reasonably well and the general land movement and features that you have. This is a lot harder for me to explain in general. It's something I'm still very much working on myself, but the concepts might be the kind of thing that you guys can digest a little bit of. So I was thinking this shape can come in there, and then maybe even this part a little bit. And what I think this will do is... Okay. Let's go delete this part here. Now that part is to sit more out. This was just better like that. Is it perfect? No. This part here sits a little better. Okay. And based on at least what we went through in the first part, you can kind of see how this leads to the green this way. This is a general kind of sculpting concept that starts to get bigger than just what the bunker itself does. It gets a little bit towards sand lines, which I want to save more for later on. Part of it can also be the way that fingers point themselves. This doesn't point completely through the green, but this finger itself does. I think if we turn this finger portion a little this way, we might be able to get a better look, or at least it'll be different. Wrong button. 4. I just had a keyboard freeze somehow. It's almost the same. You can then change this finger to point a little bit more that way as well. And this was the first example. Let me try to add one more in. That's the general sculpting technique. I've made almost no changes to it. You can come back through later and say, you know, okay, I want to get the middle of this bunker sculpted a little more nicely. Maybe you want to bring this part up. So you go 1'6". Might come up slightly, if that. I want it to come up more. Go like that. So remember, it's 1'6" is basically flat. So the main reason this bunker shape, even though it doesn't point directly at the green, kind of still works okay, is that the bunker here, or this edge, is still very much kind of following the terrain. This bit here, which is kind of guiding towards the green this way. It's kind of following that. And you can use other land features or other bunkers in combination with this. That can start to get into bunker crutchdom and stuff. To kind of complement what this one bunker does. This is also a little far from the green, potentially. Yeah, actually quite far from the green. So we could bring the green closer, or we could bring the bunker closer. Either one could be valid depending on what you're going for. Even that's actually a pretty decent look. Go more here. You can play around with the shapes. This is like a very typical modern style look. And I haven't put in any specific lift sculpting on this yet. All I did was just bring the terrain down a little bit for... Yeah, 14 bunker and overbuild is very good. All I did was just add that. So for on controller, I'm not sure if there are any other important things to keep in mind. Alright, say this really quickly. So one sec. Here. I think it won't let me move around unless I change the default to controller. Okay. Sound and designer on control. With this, I don't really think there's anything that different to keep in mind here. I think it's more so just kind of the way the camera works. The one big tip that comes to my mind for this is that when you're using the measure tool and that kind of stuff and kind of drawing out the shapes, and especially if you're using the brushes themselves. So I'll go ahead here and add a little something to this with the measure tool. So we kind of know, okay, we have a bunker here. I'm just going to put a bunker here for the sake of there being one. There's by no means saying it's correct or incorrect to have a bunker here. Let's say we want another kind of simple bunker shape there. We can just take one that kind of points. Which way do we want it to point? We'd have this one kind of running almost back to here. Here. Point. Oh, this is almost like a Matty Thompson bunker at this point. Shape-wise. Then you could actually have a third point like out there. This is almost Matty Thompson. I'm not so worried about the style though. This is just kind of show different ways to use these. I'm also much less proficient at drawing things on controller at this point, but the general idea still applies. So you go to create surfaces, take your bunker brush. If you're using circle brush, you kind of pick like a similar size and shape. And one of the main things on controller to keep out with this is, or keep in mind, is that you don't necessarily want to move. You can kind of just inch the brush, or you can slam it forward on the joystick or whatever. But the camera distance away also greatly affects how quickly the brush moves. So if you want to control the speed a little bit, you can use the camera distance or the zoom to help with that. This one I feel is maybe actually screwing for a little bit of a bunker that kind of just, something that kind of just, we do like 3 points. We saw some of that on what we looked at of his courses. Kind of like a more refined version of this. Scale that way with the terrain in the end. And this is going to be a little deep for a bunker as well, so we want to bring this up, whether with raised brush or flattened brush. And remember, ignore the numbers, just go by how it looks. To the best extent that you can. Maybe this terrain out here comes up a little to compensate. And then we have a nice spot for a bunker there. And we can see how it's going to point up nicely towards this green site, based on what we've gone over so far about framing. Actually, that's more from this angle. From here, maybe it's a little bit, it can maybe point slightly the other way. For today, this is good enough. I do want to see if I can change these fingers just slightly though. So actually, This is one other quick little tip, random. If you are making changes and you're not sure how much you're going to like them, feel free to save and then just experiment and try stuff. And worst case scenario, you can just say I don't like it, and then exit out. Yeah, this part is, it's so hard for me to explain this on controller now just because I'm so... Actually, it's going to have to come up to here. I'm going to try to freehand this a little bit. Freehanding shapes, I think, is a lot harder to do. Let's see how that did. It's kind of bad. We're going to do all the same things here. Bring this in, over that. Fill in the sand. We want this shape here in a bit more. Just right up there. Basically, that's how you make a shape on controller. Now, sculpting on controller, because it can be harder to do drag clicks, especially with flatten brush. And I didn't pre-sculpt this one. This will still work for demonstration purposes. This bunker can still come up a little bit more in general. Just be prepared for when it bumps like that. It doesn't come nearly high enough in the face of this land, so... You can see this is not a perfect job, but the bunker is starting to sit also a little bit more in the land, like some of the stuff I went over in the previous part. This section here is not so good. Either this part of the sand can be removed, or the terrain around it can come down. So this does not fit with the land. Whatever, good enough for now. So sculpting wise, since drag clicks are harder to do, and if you want to do what I do on keyboard, they're even tougher, I think this is a pretty decent workaround. You can kind of say, oh, maybe you want this part of the bunker to sit a little lower. The first thing, if you're going to be drag clicking at all, you want to go around the edges of the bunker first most of the time. Unless you're going for a very specific kind of flash sand look, you want the edges of the bunker usually down just a touch. It can depend on the style. And if you notice, I'm not using big increments here since I'm using flatten brush right now. Because of the way bunker math works, it will still pull a little bit down from the edges, even if you're not completely in the sand. And then here, maybe I can just single click this. This will all come as practice. And then the depth in the bunker itself, we want the sand a little deeper here, but not too much deeper. Let's go 1 foot. Click. Even drag a little bit. Click. And something like this is actually how I sculpted most of the bunkers on Chicola. So it's a perfectly viable method as well. Flashed sand. So that's like when the fingers themselves like more sand wall versus grass wall. Like this is a mix. This is a little bit of a lip. I've generally shown you the idea behind this method on controller, so I'm actually going to switch back to mouse for now, just because it's easier for me to explain. Or, I should say, I haven't really been on controller very much in the last 5 to 6 months, so it doesn't come as naturally to me anymore. Flash sand would be like this kind of, just sticks way up. Let's say I want to raise this part down here. And get it just to be more about the bunker itself. You can even go with it. Come on, sand. There we go. Like, that's kind of what I mean by flashed sand. Something like this. Then if you want this bunker to be properly visible, This stuff here, terrain-wise, you can bring down, whether you use flatten or raise. This edge here is not perfect by any means, but it sits in the terrain reasonably nicely. So for something I did kind of quickly, and that is generally not my style, this is how you would do this type of look. And of course, terrain-wise, wherever we are, this bunker works much better from this angle here, thereabout. This terrain would need to come down for the hole to sit properly. So you click there, and maybe click once here. You can drag click this if you want in a smaller increment. Bring this down more. More. Just keep it consistent how it was. Oh, hello there. Let's get rid of you. So we have our bunkers. They're nothing special. I didn't really fine-tune them very much. But this is how you do this. This is one bunker style and a couple different ways to use the tools to get this result. So from here, I want to go through... Actually, the next one I had down was going to be what Ben B101 tends to do for his sandwall bunkers, which is also very similar to what Maddie from Canada did on Yoho River. And for this kind of bunker, for these fingers, you could take this shape, and what he would do, or what they would do, they would take a raised brush and kind of go, the sand would be a little more like this to start. They would go around the edges of it with like a moderately small raised brush, kind of right on the edge of the sand. And what this would end up doing is just raising things up and getting a more, very much flash look where the sand fingers come way up at you like that, which is something that stylistically, especially what Maddie was doing, this is something Stanley Thompson has a lot of in his real-life bunkers. Just kind of bring this around here. This finger might come way up and then push into the green a bit. This part kind of comes down a little more. And you can do all that with raised brush. You might fine-tune it a little by doing this. Maybe this part can then come up even more. And what I'm trying to show you is the only thing I'm really changing is the way I'm sculpting this bunker, like for a different style. And the look of the bunkers and the function is going to change pretty considerably. The only thing is for this style, we don't want as much of a lip here, and this is obviously way too high above the green. So I want to just bring this stuff here down a little bit. Now, having a bunker push into the green like this is completely okay, but maybe this is a little extreme for what we're going for. So we drop all this down, maybe it'll mesh a little better. And if the green isn't here, we can just say maybe take this part, drop it down, and here we're kind of getting like raise, kind of getting like two different looks in it. This portion here would probably flash up quite high. This one here, the sand would be a lot more like this. And this is just adding some other ways to do bunkers for stylistic purposes and that kind of stuff. This is by no means a perfect demonstration. A lot of people go like this with the raised brush around the edges of their bunkers like this to add some lip definition. And how big the brush is would just change how sharp or not the contour is. So that's not too sharp. If you want to get something really sharp, you can go with a much smaller brush. You could even go with not the fuzzy brush if you want something really sharp. If you're going that sharp like this, I would probably recommend using the flattened brush. Like this is the look I'm using for the lip on the bunkers on my current course. Kind of just take it and go like this. I would not recommend duplicating this so quickly though, because there are other aspects to those bunkers that are more complicated than some of these styles are. That's kind of how I would get said look. And then because it works into the land, if you remember from earlier, especially when you have a big kind of bold bunker lip like that, you really want to work it into the land at large. So keeping that terrain flow in check. This kind of just works over this way, across. Even if you're working with a less extreme style, you can still bring this out a little bit there. These are just some ways to kind of get the bunker working with the land a bit better. And already, this is like probably the first detail sculpting thing I'd want to introduce in this series, which is some bunker detail sculpting. These are all like in completely different styles here, so this is kind of a mess. And this part here, let me try removing some of this. Just for different shapes. Yeah, that's kind of a mess either way. But the way the bunker kind of meets low, it feeds down into it a little bit here, and the high side is pushing out, and it can kind of tail off to the side a little bit as well. I would say this is the very first detail sculpting thing you guys would want to consider, which generally relates to the lips of bunkers and that stuff. So here, we can bring this part out into the lane a little bit farther. That'll be some detail sculpting. Just grab the tool, raise it up a little bit, depending on the look you want. That. Okay, all good now, I'll definitely look at that later for sure. Yeah, ignore how high the green is here, or how much higher this is than the green. Let's go like this for now. Yeah, just for tutorial purposes, but you can see, sometimes when you're sculpting the bunker like that, let's say the green isn't here. Because if this is a green, you can still have greens with these kinds of contours in them. You just want to use that more sparingly. Having bunkers pushing the greens a little bit is completely fine. But if this were not green, and we were thinking about, fairway here, you could extend this out as a really nice little detail contour to work into your fairway. Let's just go there maybe. Or maybe you wanted to go out behind the bunker more, like here. Bring this up, out here. And everything I'm doing here with a lot of the tool stuff that I mentioned, you guys, this will come in time. Maybe this part here needs to flesh down a little more. This isn't perfect or anything, but you kind of see what I'm going for. Just ways to work the bunker into the rest of the land at large. Especially this one from this angle works pretty well. So it might actually tail off more this way than that way. That's one other thing to keep in mind with bunker shapes. A lot of the times, it's very easy to get a shape that kind of presents not quite the way you'd want to from a certain angle, but more so from another. Just for the purpose of this, I'm going to go back until the green surface reappears. You can also see if you're adding interest to a putting surface, this is a little bit jumping the gun, but if we look at this here, suddenly, boom, we have a nice green contour here that we don't really have to work to create. It can just feed in off this bunker, and suddenly the green's got some interest to it. Even if it's otherwise a pancake flat green, it has something going on just from that. That's more with green side bunkers. With fairway bunkers, so we kind of have these here. Bunker placement, now that we're actually in game. Let's say strategy-wise, this was probably going to be what? A short dogleg hole from, I guess, roughly this angle. Lane kind of goes this way. And go out here. So we can fit some bunkers on the inside of the dogleg kind of in this area, or a bunker, whatever you want. And if you look at it this way, if these bunkers here are largely pointing in the same direction that these ones are, they will be good strategic hazards for the hole because they are guarding the inside of the dog leg for a green that is generally angled back towards that side. And if you kind of just point them off in this direction, they will mesh pretty well with these bunkers here. And not to mention also be pointing towards the green. So that's a quick thing you can do here. This part doesn't really seem to warrant a bunker too much. Let's say that we're just going to make this a little more dramatic for now and go like this off in here. Want to smooth things out, maybe you can go flatten right here. Here maybe. And you have some terrain now that's also kind of helping to sweep things this way a little bit towards the green. That is one thing I want to mention, that at first it is going to be quite hard just to keep in mind figuring out like where to click with the tools to get the look you want. That is something alone that can take quite a while to get the hang of. So you might be spending some time, from time to time, it might take you 20 minutes, 40 minutes, just to get the terrain changed in the spot where it actually makes the difference you want to see. That can sometimes just be name of the game with this stuff. Sorry guys, I'm going to be right back. And I'm back. So, yeah, like this kind of stuff, all the things I'm showing here, you're not certainly going to be doing all these things as well overnight. It's just not realistic. But incremental improvement here and there and every few days or that kind of stuff, and you can come along with this a lot faster than you might expect to. But anyway, let's just keep the same bunker style for now. So if we want something interesting, we kind of throw something that goes up this way maybe, back here. Or it can just even point a little bit here. Still kind of fitting the area that the land has given us. And this also is another kind of Mad F shape. Uses these kinds of shapes a lot. Maybe the exact orientation stuff isn't quite right, but it's not bad. Maybe it's just... maybe I have it the wrong way. I'm not sure. It still plays pretty well off that. Let me give this a try and see where it's at. Okay. So we've been over this method a bit by now. You guys generally know what to do with it. How shapes work. Not quite sure I want this to start and finish, so I'll be a little bit less aggressive with it. Oh, I don't think I mentioned this as well. I meant to. The speed at which you move the brush changes, or can change how smooth the shape comes out, especially when you're looking at maybe some very fast brush movement speeds. You'll get a much rougher result, which in some spots is great. Can work really well. I think this is a bit much here. Probably work better here. Let's just smooth that bit out for this style. We know what to do now. There's probably one more here to delete. And then we go more in. And click here. We can click here. Kind of, even that's not a bad shape actually. Now this part here sits down a bit low. What happens if we bring this up? We can bring this side up a little bit too. There's probably some other adjustments to make, but I'm not quite sure what. So the next method I want to show you, now we're going to go into a third method to sculpt bunkers. I said I was going to be throwing a lot of different stuff at you guys, or at least I'd outlined in the past that I was going to be showing several different methods of using the tools for this. This is what I do to sculpt bunkers. And there are so many different variations on this method, pioneered by Dylan Bronson, who was kind of the guy who cracked the flattened brush to begin with, figured out just how much you can do with it. My variation is a little bit more difficult to do, and this exact method that I'm about to show you is really, really, really hard to do on controller because it involves keeping in mind flattened brush center, flattened brush size, and kind of how many times you've been over a certain spot. This is much more complicated. Generally speaking, this method, you can go to any brush depth. Dylan tends to use it square on 0, 0. I tend to go around there for the edges, but you can adjust on the fly. Regardless of whether you're using mouse or controller and doing the edges, you can adjust on a fly. Say, okay, I want this part a little lower. Okay, great. This part I don't want to drop as much. Bring it up. You can just go around and around, get the edges a couple times. This part here maybe you want to drop in more. This part here you want up. This part here down. This is going to be like the base of the bunker. And you can, like that. That's quite hard to do on, I want to add a little more sand here. Quite hard to do on keyboard. I mean on controller. Maybe the bunker shape itself is extending too far. Yeah, I'm not quite that good with these shapes. Just go very vanilla. Maybe even too vanilla. Screw it for now. And then we have all this stuff mostly in. We know that this bunker is in a place where it can work in the visual and fit into the whole strategy, most importantly. Because remember, this stuff is still all about making golf courses in the first place. They need to play well in the end. It'll be interesting to play. My keyboard keeps freezing. Obviously some new bug. The next part, going around the inside, is more complicated. You can do this all at once, but the way the inside works is you kind of take a height. Let's say we want this, and you keep it roughly the same. You can adjust a little bit where needed. Remember, this will lower approximately a foot, or 1'1" in the end, close to that. If you remember what I said earlier on about how every single time you go over a section with the fuzzy flattened brush, it gets a little bit closer to that height, like maybe a little over half the difference. Here we use that to our advantage. And what I'm doing, I'm kind of going over this part around the edge first, because bunker math's a little weaker there. Now, once the edges are done, you then make the brush a little bigger, start to get more into the center, but still enough, small enough that it can bump. And then you focus more on just the center as the third step. Center, just the middle, outer part, bigger, into the center. And this is the other big advantage that mouse keyboard has. It's much easier to adjust the brush size on the fly and back in the middle. So that's the idea behind what I was doing with this method. And you can see the result. In that single click, I've done quite a good amount of bunker sculpting. And when you're going fast and not explaining it, it's maybe, what, 10, 20 seconds? And you've essentially gotten a lot of your bunker sculpting done. And then you can fine-tune however you want, with flatten or raise, probably flatten just because of how it interacts with bunkers in general. You bring this part down to work with the shape, maybe even down a little more. This part here we probably want down as well. And this stuff here, I'm going to keep this more to just like a flashed sand style for now. So I want to bring this part up a little. I am going to get into some grass wall principles later, but I think for starting off they're a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to save that more for later on. Actually, this up in here maybe would look pretty nice. It kind of fits the land a little better, potentially. And then, for adding the bunker lip, if you're going to do, this is very much style dependent. If you want a really big, chunky bunker lip for the style you're going for, you can take any brush and just go large with it, and boom. Chunky ass bunker lip. That doesn't work for all styles. All depends on what you're going for. If you want to keep that flash sand look, you can go lower. Also, changing the brush size. When it's a little larger, it will sharpen just slightly faster, or raise slightly faster, versus if you go really small with the same height. And you can kind of just go around like this. What I'm going to do here is roughly what I did on my bunkers at Chicola. I kind of went like this with it. Said, okay, maybe this part I don't want as tall. This part maybe we're going to accentuate a little more. Like that is what I would do with the bunkers there. And I'd usually do one extra little step. So I'd have the bunker lip how I wanted, and then to try to get a short, crisp bunker lip. This is kind of going to start bridging into the next topic. Or a next topic. I actually took the raised brush on some of them, zeroed it, and then went down a little bit on the far side, and I would go like this to try to make the lip itself slightly sharper. So that I was trying to go for a short but sharp lip on that course. And this is something that eventually I came up with that I felt helped me get a little bit closer to that kind of result, stylistically speaking. And I would go like that for the bunkers on that course. You can see here also macro, or when I say macro here, I just mean bigger than like the detail stuff. And kind of raise this up a little bit more. Get that pointing a little better. We can see there's no doubt where this portion of the bunker is kind of pointing. It's like slightly this way and slightly off to the right. Both here are fine. Or actually, we could even get this sand out here. I think this would work. Thin little bit of bunker out there. Then we can come back in here. Oh, even just raising there is nice. Just like a little more detail into it. Not necessarily necessary. So, next step, obviously I didn't do the left side of this bunker, so we can kind of do the same thing there. I'm going to make the lip the same kind of way. Small little brush. Just go along the edge. So we get that lip roughly how we want it. A little bit more here. There went a little more spilling out of the center in this spot. And go there. And if you look at it this way, this looks like a bunker. It looks like what you would expect a bunker to look like. We can also see here that it's not quite meshing perfectly with the land over here. Maybe say if we did this, brought this stuff down, maybe even out more, the sand kind of this way. Yeah, more like a matte F look here. This bunker, for the most part, once we get a little bit more detail stuff done around the edges, like maybe this, then we can bring this stuff here up a little bit, and then out. Even this part actually will blend a little better. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. This bunker is very much kind of sitting with the terrain. Maybe if this comes back one notch, it'll be better. It's not perfect, but good enough for now. This bunker is very much sitting with the terrain it's in. The sculpting extends out nicely past the bunker as well. A little bit on the far side here, you can see the bunker still sitting in this land here. And also, the fingers themselves are kind of pointing a little bit this way, and in combination with this land direction, kind of give you a net where this is going to be a quick little bit that gets into a topic for the next part, which is bunkers having multiple functions now. So this bunker kind of points a little bit this way, as we can see. It also kind of points a little bit this way. And it also fits with the land well too. So the idea with this kind of bunker, maybe it's not quite in just the right spot in terms of like macro stuff. Down a little, maybe up a little here. That this is better. Not only points towards the green, but it's also pointing off towards this bunker a little bit, and also at the same time off towards this bunker. This is another really big concept which will just be tough. We're going to get into this a little bit more in the next section and some kind of tips and tricks for that. So this is just one example of bunker shapes. This is generally stuff kind of within Matt F's general bunker shape style.